At the moment, I'm reading my way through Psalms. So I decided on New Year's Day, I actually read Psalm 23. And I'm going to read it in a moment. And I decided first Sunday of the year, I'm going to look at the Psalms to encourage us. And Psalm 23 is such a well-known psalm. Let me read it to you. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I'll fear no evil, for you're with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. That sounds great, doesn't it? My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and your mercy will follow me all the days of my life. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You just love that, don't you? That is a great psalm. We're in the Bunya Mountains just this past week. That's one of the photos I took. Bunya Mountains. It looks beautiful. The waterfalls were lovely. Everything was... And that reminds me of the 23rd Psalm, actually. That's sort of just absolutely beautiful. He refreshes my soul. My cup overflows, and serenity and just wonderful. That was New Year's Day Psalm. And I love that psalm because David's actually writing at the end of his life, that psalm. And he's looking back over his life and he's saying, this is what I can see in my life. The balance of my life, were I to weigh it up, Psalm 23 sums up my life. But it's interesting, the day before, I read Psalm 22. And I'll read Psalm 22 to you. Now, I took that photo at the Bunya Mountains. It looks fantastic. I took this one at Caloundra about 6 months ago with a massive storm coming. And I took some photos of the storm and forgot to run for the unit and got caught in the storm. But this is what Psalm 22 says. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out by day, but you don't answer. By night I find no rest. But I am a worm, I'm not even a man. I'm scorned by everyone, despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults at me, shaking their heads. He who trusts in the Lord, they say, they laugh at me. Do not be far from me, for trouble is near, and there is no one to help me. That's the psalm before. Look at the difference. What a psalm. That's a psalm of encouragement for you this year. Psalm 22. David wrote them both, yet they're so different. And it's no accident that they're side by side in the Psalms, because when the Psalms were first compiled, they were grouped together. And the people that compiled the first Psalms wanted the first readers, the Israelites, to see the balance of life. There's seasons in life, and Psalm 23 is so serene, and so my cup overflows. Psalm 22 is, there's no one to help me. I'm in a dark, dark place. And so you have this balance. You have the Bunya Mountains, peaceful, compared to there's a massive storm coming and you better find cover. Our lives aren't constant. Our lives go in seasons. And I don't know what season you're starting this year in, 2025. I don't know if you feel like this or you feel like this. Not sure what season you're in, but it's interesting that in both these Psalms there is a common thread. One Psalm is everything's lovely, one Psalm is nothing is lovely. But there is a common thread, and the common thread in these Psalms is, but no matter what season I'm in, there is hope in God. No matter where I am, there is hope in God. No matter what I'm doing, no matter what I'm going through, there is hope in God. And this comes through in both Psalms. There's a couple of truths that come through really strongly. How can I have hope in God even if I'm in a storm? How can I have hope in God? The first truth that comes through really strongly is He's in control. He holds the remote to life. I'm not in control. This is what Psalm 22 says in all the gloom of Psalm 22. You read it, it's really depressing until you read these lines. But God, you are enthroned as the Holy One. In you our ancestors put their trust. They trusted in you and you delivered them. They cried out to you and they were saved. In you they trusted and they were not put to shame. No matter how out of control my life feels, I know that you came through. And in this psalm, David looked back He said, I remember the stories of my ancestors. I remember when they were up against the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army coming after them and they had nowhere to go. And I remember how you made a way. And I remember when they were in the desert and they had nothing to eat or drink, and they were actually saying we should go back to slavery, but you made a way. And in God there's hope. And David was saying, this is how I'm feeling at the moment. It feels like you're not even there. It feels like everything's bad. It feels like there's no one to help me. But I'm still going to hope in you because of the stories I remember about our ancestors. I'm still going to put my hope in you because you've been proven in the past. I'm still going to put my hope in you. And so in the midst of his gloom in Psalm 22, he remembers God's got the remote, not me. Just as well I haven't got the remote. When I'm at home and Carly and I, our chairs are together, I like giving her the remote. I like her being in control. And so does she, by the way. Works well for us. For my own life, when I take the remote myself and try, I just seem to get the wrong channel. But when I realise, hey, you've got the remote, I'll just go with your program. It's amazing how God brings me through. And he picks up this theme again in Psalm 23. He says, the Lord is my shepherd. In the good times, in the bad times, God is in control. And David knew all about the role of a shepherd because he was a shepherd. The shepherd's role is to care and protect and lead to where the food is. And the shepherd would know his sheep and they would trust him. And so the theme of these Psalms, whether you're in a season of storms and it feels like everything's raging around you, or whether you're in a good season, the theme of these Psalms is he's in control. I can put my hope in him. If your life's in turmoil right now, if you read Psalm 22 and you can relate to it, take hold of those verses where it says, but you brought my ancestors through and you will deliver me. God is in control. He holds the remote. Just relax and let him choose the channel. He's in control. God also always provides. God is always there to lend a hand. Psalm 22 was written when David was at probably one of the lowest parts of his life, where he'd been anointed the new king of Israel, the future king, but King Saul was still in charge of the country. And King Saul was trying to kill David because he knew that David would take over as king one day and he didn't want that. And so David was on the run. And if you read of these passages in Samuel and Kings, you read about how David was barely surviving in the desert, and it said that he had to lie in holes in the ground at night to sleep, and he slept in caves and he was living right on the edge. And listen to what David writes about it. He says, my mouth is dried like a potsherd and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me down in the dust of death. Is there any worse feeling than your tongue sticking to the roof of your mouth and you can't get it off because there's no moisture? This is David. How dramatic does he write it down? I am right on the edge. I've got nothing left. But then he remembers, but God, you're in control and you will provide for me. Even in Psalm 22, there's hope. This is what he writes. Yet you brought me out of the womb. Yet you made me trust in you even at my mother's breast. From birth, I started trusting in you. And from my mother's womb, you have been my God. So even in the worst of situations, I can put my trust in him because he will come through. This is one of my favourite photos in the world. I've talked about this in church before, but it's a story worth telling again. This is a picture of my daughter in 2019. She just finished high school. And we're on the ferry between Dover and Calais. And she'd finished grade 12, we were on holidays together, we were going to northern France to see the battlefields. And just before we'd left England, I went to one of my accounts. Now, this is in the olden days where I couldn't use my phone to buy stuff, I had to use a card. And so I went to get something, buy something at the supermarket. They said, you've got no funds left. I looked in that account. The day before, someone had emptied my account out, so I had no money in that account. Someone in Delhi, I found out later, some Indian guy emptied my account out. I had no money. But that was all right because I had another account with a different card and a different bank. So I was fine. I was going overseas. I was all set. So at Dover that morning, I asked a taxi, called for a taxi. This old lady who looked like my nana, actually, she was going to drive us from our accommodation to the port. And I just said to her, I need to get some money from the ATM before I go to pay you. And so she took me to an ATM. I put my card in and it chewed it up, gobbled it up. And so I went inside. It was a newsagent, and they said, we've got no control over that. When the card comes in, it's shredded straight away. So now I'm in Dover with no cards, no money, and no way to get money. And I sort of wandered back to the taxi thinking, what am I going to do? And I told the taxi driver, and she said, I'll drive you to the ferry terminal for free. You can just pay me when you come back. But jump on the ferry and just work out what you're going to do. And so I did. And so we jumped on the ferry, and I took that photo of my daughter because she had absolutely no idea what was going through my head at that moment. Because I suddenly realised I'm on the way to France with no money, with no way to get money, and no way to purchase anything. And even if Carly, I woke her up at midnight and said, transfer money to these accounts, I didn't have cards any way to access it. So I had no money going to France. At Calais, I'd hired a car that I hadn't paid for yet. Because what I did is booked it, but didn't pay for it in case plans changed. So I'm going to France to get a car that I hadn't paid for, stay in accommodation I hadn't paid for. I have no money and no way of paying. And I am absolutely churning inside now. I'm churning. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm thinking, this is crazy. I'm going to a country with no money. I've got nothing. I'm really worried. And I took that photo of my daughter because she's sitting there serenely, having no idea what I'm going through, and she's just calm as anything. And I look at that photo and realise she's calm because she's with Dad. She doesn't know what's going on. She can't comprehend what I'm thinking. And she's just with her dad and she's not worried at all. And so I got to, halfway over on the ferry, I actually went to the office on the ferry and said, I've got a return trip that's 8 days away. Can I return straight away because I've got no money? And they said, well, you can, but it'll cost you £50. And I don't have £50. So now I'm literally going to France with no money, no anything. And I get to Calais, I go to the rental place for the car, and I walk in and I say to the lady, this is a bit of an unusual request, but can I have the car for no money? Because I don't have it. I promise I'll pay you back when I bring the car back in a week. And the lady said, no. Then she said, I'll ring my manager and run it by him, but there's no chance. And so she rang a manager and she's speaking in French on the phone, and I could see her face change, and then I could see she was really surprised. She hung up and she said, this is a miracle. I don't know why he's doing this, but he's allowing you to take the car as long as you solemnly swear that you'll pay us when you come back in 8 days and bring the car back. And so I said, yeah, sure. And so she just, as I'm walking out, she said, I won't see that car again, will I? I said, yeah, you will, sure you will. And so I hopped in the car, then driving to accommodation at Dunkirk, I get a message we were staying in a B&B, and I get a message, and the arrangement was I'd pay them when I get there. And I get a message saying, we've been called away unexpectedly, make yourself at home, pay us when you can. And so I'm thinking, oh, this is fantastic. I've got the car for nothing. I've got accommodation for nothing. When we were in Calais, I went to a bakery in Calais. And, I walked in and we've got no money for food either. And so I walk into this bakery and I just look and I say, do you speak English? And they said, no. And I thought, oh. And then I said something like, under my breath, I said something like, you're not in Australia now. And one of the guys heard me. He said, Australia? And I said, yeah. He said, oh, we all speak English. They thought I was English. They didn't want to. Yeah. As soon as I said I was Australian, then they said, whatever you want in the bakery is yours. Take what you want. We'll give it to you for nothing because you're Australian. I'll never forget this. In the corner of the bakery was this really old, he looked about 100 years old, this really ancient gentleman. And he saw me come in, and he must have been the head of the family, I'd say. And he saw me come in, he saw me say, speak English, and they said, no. And then he heard me, and then he heard them say, oh, we'll give you anything you want. And he just started laughing, and he had this really funny, he just went, And he didn't stop laughing. He just thought it was the funniest thing ever. So I had whatever I wanted in that bakery for free. Croissants and quiches. It was amazing. And it was crazy because what I could see is God will provide. But I still had no card. And so I rang a Suncorp when it was Queensland time, and they said, we can't help you. Like, it's a Visa's problem. And so I rang Visa thinking, I'm in big trouble still. And Visa said, we'll have you a card within 12 hours at your next accommodation point. And I thought, and I said, I still haven't got any money. They said, we'll put €2,500 in there to tide you over. And so I just thought, and sure enough, when we went to Amiens, the next place, the card was waiting for me. And so I was looking this morning for it, and I've still got the ticket from the Dover ferry, and I've got the card that was sent to me, and I've kept it. I should frame it, because I look at it occasionally and realise even when I'm in the worst of situations with no hope, God provides. And for some reason, that manager of the car rental company provided the car. And for some reason, those people at the B&B said, we're not going to be there, pay us whenever you can. And for some reason, we got given food, and we went to Villas Brettoneux, and I went to a pub there, and a sign inside the pub said, Aussies eat for free. And so we ate big that day, Anna and I. And so it just kept on happening and happening and happening. And what it showed me is God will provide. And even though Anna didn't know the depth of my fear, and she was calm, what that photo shows me is, even if I knew the depth of fear that I was in, even if she knew, knowing that God is in control should make me calm. Hey, I might feel like I'm in trouble. I might feel like there's no accommodation and I need it. I might feel like, but God's in control. And I'll let him provide for me. I'll just tell you this quickly. We went back to Dover in 8 days following, and I rang up the taxi company and asked for the same lady. And they said, oh, why do you want her? She's not on duty. And I said, she took me to the terminal 8 days before, and I couldn't pay her. I want to pay her back. And then there was all this screaming on the phone, and what the owner of the company answered the phone. And when I said I want to pay her back, he said, you wouldn't believe it, that guy, he's going to pay us back. And they just had a big party, basically. He came and picked me up in a limo and said, there's no charge for the limo, but if you would like to give that lady a tip, and ended up giving her €50 or something. Everything I had, basically, I gave. But they then, I wrote them, they said, can you write us an email telling what we did for you? And they've now got it as one of their main advertising things in their company. This is how we serve people. And so, you see, God just provides. God provides. He's the one that can make a way when there is no way. He's the one that, when Abraham took his son Isaac up on the mountain, he provided the goat to be sacrificed. When provided the ram, and he's called our provider, and he provides a way when there is no way. In Psalm 23, he clings on to that, by the way, in Psalm 22. David clings on to that. I am totally bereft. I'm hungry and thirsty. I'm sleeping in a cave, but I'll hope in you. And he clings on to that. In Psalm 23, he reflects on that. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. I wonder as he wrote that out, whether he remembered the day years before when he had nothing, sleeping on the dirt. Lord, you provide. It's all about you. And as we begin 2025, don't know what season you're in. Maybe you're looking for accommodation, God will provide. Maybe you're going through a really tough time, God will provide. God is the provider. He's in control, he provides, he also protects. He's our security. This is what David wrote in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I won't fear evil, for you're with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Your version might say this: even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear. What's the valley of the shadow of death? Have you ever thought of that? That thought is embedded in the Israelites' psyche. Jeremiah said years and years before, this is what Jeremiah said. Years and years later, he said this: Where is the Lord who brought us up out of Egypt and led us through the barren wilderness, through the land of deserts and ravines and the land of drought and utter darkness? That was the valley of the shadow of death. And for the Israelites, it was something that was in their psyche, that we will go through good times, but we'll also go through the valley of the shadow of death, they called it. And Jeremiah, writing later, he says, this is the land where no one wants to travel, where no one lives. It's a dark place, but it's the place where I feel God's presence. And David had been in that place and felt God's presence. And he wrote in Psalm 22, don't be far from me, for trouble is near and there's no one to help. But the next line says, but you, Lord, don't be far from me, because you're my strength. So come quickly to help me, deliver me from the sword. And even if we go through the darkest valley, he's our security. And David says it in both Psalm 22 and Psalm 23, that we can go through scary places. It's interesting with Jeremiah when he wrote about the valley of the shadow of death, when he wrote about the dark valley. This is what he wrote in that passage where he's talking about the dark valley. He says, where is the Lord who brought us up out of Egypt, who led us through the barren wilderness, through the land of deserts and drought and under darkness? The point of that passage is he led us through. He brought us through that valley of the shadow of death. And then it goes on to say, he brought us through into fertile land where there's fruit and rich produce. He brought us through. Let me tell you, if you're going through the valley of the shadow of death at the moment, don't think, where is God? I shouldn't be here. Think, even though I'm going through the valley of the shadow of death, he is with me. And he will lead me through into the land of produce. How do you know God's blessing on your life unless you've first gone through the darkest valley? God's blessing wouldn't mean much to me if I was just blessed all the time and didn't know what it was to walk through the darkest valley with God with me. But he walks me through those into times of blessing, and then I really appreciate him. And I've got those things in my box at home of when I was in France and feeling utterly desolate. And I'll tell you the truth, Anna was only 18 and it was her first time overseas, and I'm feeling like a failure as a father, thinking, what, I'm going to have to sleep on some park bench in Calais in the snow. I just felt like a failure. God brought me through, miraculously. And when Anna found out, she's like, wow, Dad, why didn't you tell me? Because I'm your dad. And I have got a dad who watches over me as well. And he will bring you through. Even though I will walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I won't fear, for you're with me. As we start 2025, maybe your life feels like trying to go back. You'll have to take me back. I'm not working it properly. Maybe my life feels like the Bunya Mountains, where everything's great. Fantastic. Rejoice in that. Thank God. Be generous to others in those times. But maybe your life right now feels like I'm in the middle of a massive storm. Don't fear. God's got a plan. He knows what he's doing, and he will lead you through the valley of the shadow of death into a place where there's produce and where you know his blessing. So whatever circumstance you start 2025 in, be confident he will bring you through. And this year will be a good year. Even if it's just a year where my character's built, it's going to be a great year because he's in control. Why don't you stand with me? We're going to pray. It's interesting, you know, when you talk about things embedded in the Jewish psyche, you're talking about thousands of years of trust in God, of realising that he'll bring us through no matter what. That's the sort of faith I want to have. No matter what situation I find myself in, he'll bring me through. I trust in him. Lord, I want to thank you for your word, which brings hope. I want to thank you for experiences I've gone through personally, which has proved your faithfulness. May I never forget them, but may they build character in my life. And I'm praying for this coming year. I don't know what this year will hold. I know that there'll be times of great joy and laughter, but I also know there'll be times of crying. I know there'll be times of grief, and maybe even feels like I'm walking through the valley of the shadow of death. I pray whatever season I'm in, that I would hold on to the fact you're in control, you're my provider, you're my protector, and you will lead me through this year, and I will be a bigger person. Lord, help me just to trust in you. And I particularly pray for those here today who have little hope for this year, who are really walking through a dark valley, and maybe no one else knows about the valley they're walking through. I pray that they realise you're right there with them. You're walking through that valley, and you will not let them down. May we start 2025 with that thought. You will not let me down. Lord, may we know your presence in a real way, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.